Hello, everyone. Welcome to this morning's episode. The title has arrived: Identity's Manifestation, and with it, an important question: who is identifying with the identity? You see, in this world, human beings have been identifying with various kinds of appearances, objective realities, and even identifying with subjective reality. You know? There was something I read that it was close to going into legislation here in Canada, but it didn't. And it was this thing that human beings could identify beyond their framework of, I guess, biological position. And so there was something, for example, I just remember one term, it was called foxkin. And these are people who are identifying with a fox. They feel in a past life they were a fox. I know it sounds humorous, but the situation of identity is very difficult to consider because on some level, it's like if we consider there's an inner realm and an outer realm, the person can identify with who they see themselves as. Do you know? Or they can identify with what the world sees, or it's somewhere in between. So, anyways, what I'm saying is that identity is key. Identity is a big topic of discussion, and to wonder about what is really going on when a human being identifies with something is crucial to look at. Now, here I've made some notes here before beginning, and I was thinking about this idea of how is identity manifesting. And I felt that I can explain it to the reader through two ideas, and the attached self and the unattached self. Because identity is something where it's an action of identification. You're identifying with something. That means if you don't know, if I, for example, this may be difficult, but if I don't know there's a coffee cup in front of me, if I wanted to identify as a coffee cup, it would be impossible. There needs to be an exposure to the identity. You need to see the identity. See something to identify with, I mean. Now, I thought about it, the attached self, the unattached self, and what could that imply about identity? Could it be that we have someone who identifies with something but they are not attached to it? For example, one moment you were on a roller coaster, or you went to a football game and you wore a jersey and you identified. It's as if it's an unattached self to the identity. You're not attached to the identity. For example, someone, let's say person A is walking in the park, person B comes and says, "You're a loser, man." Something like that. Do you know? Now, person A, who has heard this from person B, can identify with that language. Person A can totally believe person B. Do you know? Or person A cannot identify with that. Regardless of whatever ideology, whatever relationship, whatever image, the person knows that their eyes are their eyes. You know? This was something I couldn't understand when I was younger. It's like something similar to when a very young kid is gone to a doctor's office and the doctor is asking the kid a question to see the feedback of the kid's body. Like, does it hurt here, kid, when I hit this weird hammer thing? So uh, I wouldn't communicate. I wouldn't. Here's the thing. Somehow in life, I had misidentified with my own eyes. I was an attached self, I can say. I was attached to a certain identity, and if I felt the conditions of my environment, either the outer realms change, that inner realm identity would change. You know? Now, I decided to share two stories. I've made a note of them here so I don't forget them. The two stories that can really show you what I mean by the attached self's identification and the unattached self's identification. The attached self, I want to share a story with you. It's the story of two monks. If you're regular, you've heard it before. If you're new, it's new. The story is about these two monks, a junior monk and a senior monk. This junior monk has joined monk school. Like he's like, yo, these monks are super cool and enlightened. Let me join. And he's joined, and what monks do is they take vows. And these vows are vows of conduct and behavior. For example, a monk doesn't go clubbing on Friday. So anyways, this is the stories back in the day. It's a Zen story. This junior monk has joined this temple. He's assigned to a senior monk. The senior monk and the junior monk have gone for a walk. Monks would either sit or they would walk or talk. It's like basic. Yes, that is the story, but I'm gonna still say it. Dispatch Gaming in the chat section. You know the story, but I'm gonna say it again. So pretty much, this junior monk and senior monk, they're walking, and the junior monk and senior monk, they come across this very attractive, this very beautiful girl by the river, you know, and this girl wants to cross the river and she can't. She has a, I don't know, long dress. She needs someone to help her. She needs some manpower in that moment. And what happens is this man is a monk. He's a monk. He's a simple. And the monk comes there, and the junior monk, look at how the junior monks understood it. The junior monk is like, yo, we're monks. There's no way. We gotta, like, as if women are kryptonite. Women are kryptonite for a man's purity. So anyways, the junior monk has this view, and he's like, no, we can't help her. We're monks. We shouldn't. It's as if, like, it's strange. But anyways, there's a reason why monks renounce material pleasures, but there's ways of doing it. So anyways, in the story, the junior monk's like, we're not going to help him in his mind, but to his surprise, the senior monk has already walked up to the woman by the river and asked her, and literally he's asking, it's like, do you need help or something? And she's like, yeah, I need to get to the other side. And he helps him. And he picks up this woman, this monk, this senior monk, and carries the woman across the river and puts her on the other side. And the woman says, thank you. The junior kid is like, what did I just witness? I got to tell this to somebody. What is this? Is this guy my senior? Is this guy supposed to be a senior, example of a monk? And the senior monk notices. He notices there's like something off, something on this kid's mind. And so as they're going, 20 minutes pass, and the monk is like, the senior monk knows it's coming. And the kid suddenly turns around to junior monk, and of course, very politely, he says, sir, how could we as monks take a vow of not touching women, of renouncing? Why is it that you carried her and put her on across the stream, across the river? This is the answer of what I mean about, I'm trying to share a sort of view about the attached self. The senior monk says, I carried her in that moment and I put her on the other side of the river, and that action finished. That activity finished. You have been carrying her for 20 minutes in your mind. You see? You see the sophistication of this human intelligence that we have. That events can linger even after they're done. After the event has happened. So the idea of the attached self was that kid was more attached to the identity, identity of a certain characterhood, I could say, a certain way a monk has to be. That person hadn't realized that this life, this whole renunciation thing, is not that you stop existing. So many people feel these mystical traditions that they said don't go after your desires. Guess what? Eating food, going to the bathroom, drinking a glass of water, these are micro desires. Why these desires are not wrong, but other desires are wrong? Because of this, because of the confusion of the state of mind. You see, there is an inner realm at work. You do have an inner life. And when you're in society, the only reason we have the concept of honesty and dishonesty is because that inner self can hide. That inner life can hide. So So that's the story about the attached self. In that instant, that kid was attached. He couldn't witness an event, and the event just happened and passed. He wasn't at the level of like these Zen masters in these Zen tea ceremonies. When the guy's drinking a cup of tea, he's neither a Zen master. It's nothing. It's just the activity, moment to moment activity. Being conscious of the activity. So that's the story I wanted to share about the notion of an attached self. You can get attached to an event even after the event is gone. This is important. Now, the unattached self, I'm going to share another story here. I'm sharing these stories so that they can make the ideas memorable. The unattached self is very important. This story is remarkable. I love this story. This story begins with this incredible yogini, this incredible woman who's enlightened. Anyways, the second story, this very incredibly both externally and internally beautiful, enlightened, liberated woman is walking. And she's walking in a stream, like river dash stream. This female sage, as she's walking in this river, she's blissed out, this incredible sensation. It's a sunny day and her feet are in the water and she's walking. And suddenly she notices something shiny in this stream dash river. And she notices it's a ruby. It's the giant, it's like this biggest apple-sized ruby that was just there, you know? And so she picks it up and she's like, what a beautiful stone. And she holds the stone in her hand. It feels nice. And she's walking. Remember, she's an enlightened figure in the story. And so she goes, as she's going, this young guy who's coming off from work or buying bread or something, he sees this woman with this ruby in her hand, as if like one part of the stream dash river was close to the town. And so this kid's walking by with, imagine, bread in his hand. He's bought bread. And as he's walking by, he suddenly sees this giant ruby in the hand of this woman, in the hand of this yogini. And what happens is that he goes up to her, and with an intensity, as if he's saying like, give it to me. He says it to her, and he says, give me that ruby, please, now. Like something intense, something where he's politely saying, give me that, but you could totally see this kid's mind is possessed by that object. He's never seen something like that. And the lady looks at him, this liberated lady, and says, here, gives the ruby. Gives the ruby to this guy, and this guy forgets about the lady, forgets about everything, just smashes the ruby into the bread so it's hidden, and runs home as quick as he can. He's found the treasure. He goes into his house, opens the door, closes the door behind him, puts the smushed up bread on the table, breaks the bread. He doesn't even care about the decency of cutting the bread, and he gets the ruby, puts the ruby on the table, stares at it, and smiles. Suddenly, something happens. He goes in shock, and he's about to cry. He's noticed something. What has this man who has just taken the treasure noticed? This is the moral of the story, guys. The moral of the story is that kid realizes, and he says to himself, oh my God, what did that woman have that she could let a treasure this big go? He realizes the treasure was not the rock, was the ability to let go. That was the treasure. That was the inner treasure. Do you see? And that's what I mean by the unattached self, that you can identify with a certain activity as you do it. If I have a hammer in my hand, I'm going to identify like Thor, I'm going to feel like Thor when slamming that. Imagine in the future they have robotic suits. I go in that robotic suit, I'm going to be like, yeah, I can identify as Iron Man, right? So the thing is, we notice something and we notice an idea or a certain possibility for a subject and we dress up as the subject. Of course, people have multiple senses. You can look at the human mind from just a singular perspective. It's just one thing, or you can see it that it's way more complex. It's not as simple. It's not as simple. And this question of who is identifying with the identity means even before there is something to identify, who is there. These questions are important. We're reaching a point. We're reaching a point as human beings where our attention to language is becoming more single pointed. We have dwelled as creatures of language. Now, I consider myself a unique position. The reason is because I am suggesting that language doesn't contain all of reality. Language is a limited subjective linguistic simulation that the moment you move, the moment you speak, you evoke as an individual. The beautiful thing about life is that it changes. And really, this question of identity is like both you change, like you don't have the same body as 10 years ago, you don't have the same psychological composition constitution as 10 years ago, based on the new experiences you have. So I've reached a point where I am kind of noticing that identity is conscious self-art to some degree. That certain percentage of it is how the conscious entity with the free will moves, and some percentage of it is what biological actual position you are. Do you know? And this doesn't mean there's many kinds of human beings. This world isn't designed so we're all clones. That means people have freedom in this world. But I'm saying that there's this trend that is going on where it took us 4 billion years to arrive at a state of simplicity. What's going on is that what's the term I want to use? You see, we want freedom, but we don't want its chaos. We want freedom, but we don't want the chaos that comes with it. But too much. There is the saying that too much freedom can be chaos. You give a young kid who doesn't have any reason to have a car, or the person is not even ready to drive the car, you give that kid freedom. You're like, yeah, kid, go drive a truck. Your legs can't reach the, gas, but go drive it. You have freedom. Well, that freedom can be devastating. Do you know? That means, especially, this is something that many, I'm just simply trying to suggest that our identity is where the spotlight of our attention goes, and it's a response. It's a response to an environment. That means it's like a person who doesn't really imagine you're not much of a person who watches football or soccer, you know. So imagine you're seeing your friends are watching soccer, for example, and then you're like, which team is winning? But you don't care, for example. You don't even know the players. You just know the color, you just see different colored jerseys. And so in that situation, let's say because you're neutral, you can identify with the winning team. Do you know? So we have to really look at this issue of identity, because if there is too much freedom or too much lack of freedom, there is a consequence. There is a consequence of confusion. You know? This doesn't mean everybody has to be just one thing. Again, I'm going to repeat this. It just means that we have different phases in life where sometimes we're attached to a sense of self and sometimes we're not. You know? a lot of what I consider to be stuff that I was incapable and then suddenly I became capable in, they were not with the same identification with the world. And it's this unique thing where every day you wake up, isn't it a new opportunity to identify with everything? Do you know? Like for me, it's like the question of identity is much deeper. It is going to how the psychology or how the sensory perception actually manifests. That means we're trying to wonder if identity was a simulation, how is it being simulated? You know? A certain percentage of it is based on the physical component. Like you identify with the person you see in the mirror. If you're someone right now you don't identify with who's in the mirror, that means you don't see yourself or you don't want to. And both can be dangerous. And when I say dangerous, I mean, here's the thing. They say if somebody thinks they're an idea, let's say you identify as, what's a good example? Let's say you identify with I mean in the new age community this is happening, but there are some people who are identifying with being an extraterrestrial, for example. You know? Okay, maybe that example's too extreme. I'm just trying to say that sometimes it feels to me that it's not necessarily that there is an identity. I mean, you can say that the memory, the past is a container, and the future is like what's being poured in it, and it's all being received in the present. You can have that analysis. Einstein has this quote where he says, "We created time so everything doesn't happen at once." Now that idea of not everything happening at once, if everything was happening at once, there would be no time to identify. That means you couldn't even have a past self or a future self. Everything in life would be one event, one massive, let's say from a macro micro angle, inseparable process. For me, I noticed there is in life different speeds of change, even though it's all changing, but things change at different speeds. Sometimes things change when you pay attention to them. Sometimes you can want to change, but if you don't pay attention to the right thing, it's like nothing changes, you know? Because just the sentence, just the fact that you can identify, that's a verb. Like, where is the limit? You know? We can identify with anything if we wanted to just be on a subjective level, you know? That means you can be, for example, I don't know, in your late 20s and identify as, an immortal being. Imagine in the future, people are like, I identify as an immortal, you know? You know? And it's fine. The person can, but it doesn't mean it actually is their identity. It just means that's where their attention is, or that's how their attention wants to express. Now, in anything that a person looks at, there's different options. You can either zoom into something and extract identity that way, or you can zoom out. Sometimes I unidentify, and that's a liberating identity. Imagine you're working with a group of people and you suddenly see the way they're speaking about. I mean, like, here's the thing. Even though there is different audiences, for example, like this whole thing about political correctness going on uh, in Western civilization in regards to PC culture and people being sensitive about words being harassment. For example, somebody just saying a language like in certain contexts it has been considered harassment. You know, I mean, of course, it has to do with the intention of the person. Both sides. That means that you can imagine like good and evil on both sides. You can imagine a good person. You can imagine good and evil on both sides, really. I would say, okay, here, let's start from an interesting point. Guys, I'm going to just check something. I'm going to see if I can steer the talk this way. By the way, it's whoever's listening, please share where in the world you're listening from and what time it is. I think that's a good habit we get going, so I get a sense of people from where they're listening. This is me. Uh, See, guys, when we look at the definition of identity, literally, I'm looking at the dictionary, the definition of identity. The fact of being who or what a person or thing is. He knows the identity of, okay, that's the example. The characteristics determining this, um, of an object serving to establish who the holder, owner, or wearer is. Yeah, I mean, that's a different sense of it. A close similarity or affinity in mathematics, a transformation that leaves an object unchanged. Okay, nice. We have people from Florida and Idaho. Nice. So, guys, the definition of identity is the fact of being who or what a person or thing is. That means you can even identify, like if it was me, I experientially identify beyond language. That means there could be people who are not just identifying that they're just a name, they're just a character in a subjective storyline. I mean, there's more to life. There's dimensions of it. I consider personally, just states that your mind can go where not time is not even linear. It's just that the inner realms can move the outer realms. Usually the outer realms move the inner realms. That's all those people waiting for a savior. It's like someone sitting on a chair and being like, please guys, please help lift me up, from this chair. And someone can come and lift them. But the thing is, you won't know your strength if you don't lift yourself. That means it's like there were certain situations in my life where in my youth I had this attitude of prayer, you know? And I had this very strange attitude where I would pray for my own future. you know? Like, guys, you don't know. Like, I've had very strange moments where I've prayed for for my future self. But anyways, that's a different talk. I'll keep that. The species needs to have tolerance for multidimensional frameworks of trying to comprehend how the psyche is being fragmented. Right, in psychology, they speak about a fragmented psyche, and sometimes, I mean, of course, it becomes very complex because even though the person feels they have a free will, they are who they are, they can do many things, but this free will is subject to the limitations of how well the objectivity is going, you know? So the question can become very deep, that who is identifying when there is nothing to identify, you know? I feel the concept of who, the concept of me, or the I thought, or what has been known as the ego, or Alan Watts explained it as the attention to the self in the immediate moment. That attention to self in the immediate moment, it's an inner room. So I feel what is occurring with identity and identification is that there is the inner realms shifting and it's appearing as a weather. So I feel emotions are not just a response to external circumstances. They are also the possibility of the inner realm. That means when I came to give this talk, I saw the title, I closed my eyes, and believe it or not, by just watching the moment, the mind's movement arises. You see, if you try to move the mind, I feel it's that the mind, like this quantum physicist said, it's like a lion caged. It's caged by the limits of the free will. You know, it's an incredible idea that we're on a rock in the middle of nowhere right now. And that we have emerged. That means, what were we identifying with before we had language? Nice, guys. We have someone listening from Croatia. Badass, you know. This is honestly like, if I ever see, you know, the founder of YouTube, I'm just gonna hug that guy. So I'm just saying, we tend to think, just to bring the attention back to the talk, we tend to think we're just one person. We tend to look at people and think that's a good person, that's a bad person. But what if we're attention? We're attention in a moment of being, and the content of the attention changes. The content of the attention shifts. You know, that means this is the strange thing. I'm like, whose birthday is it? Like, imagine on my own birthday, you know? It's like, whose birthday are we celebrating, you know? This is why yogis don't celebrate birthdays, guys, you know, because they don't know if they were born or not. You know, they don't know. If I identify with my past, I am dead to the future. If I identify with the future, I am dead to my past. When I identify with the present, there is a decision. The same step that you can take into the future is also what you can choose to perceive from your past. You know? So this idea that people are good and bad, I feel that's not the case. We are just the presence of an attention. This attention is conditioned into humanhood, you know? That means if like a messed up dictator, let's say like Hitler used propaganda, do you know? Hitler, especially during the world wars, propaganda usage was heavy. You know, and propaganda means that a story, and a dishonest story is being honestly consumed by people for a different agenda. That means the person like Hitler's like, okay, let me brainwash as many people into feeling that, for example, Jewish people are like bacteria. Like you can think of how fucked up Hitler was. Do you know that he saw a human, he reduced the human being to his dislike? Do you know? Like, it's messed up. You know, identity is very, it's like something you can't even study, because everybody's DNA is different. Their brain function is different. Their conditioning is very different. Like, all those people who in their lives have gone to psychologists and therapists, I mean, I understand. Like, you know, maybe it's good to have someone to share with, you know, but on another angle, that person can never see your life like you are seeing it. Do you know? And so I was thinking, like, what's going on in these therapy sessions? Just the whole system. Is the person spending the whole session telling a story to the therapist, and the therapist being like, yes, no? Like, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Like, you know, the guy tells a story and the therapist is like, yeah, I'll go with number C. You know, I'll see you later. So that's the thing, you know. It's like, I feel that I can't even, the way I look at life right now, I can't even put it into a concept. I don't know how people are doing this. I don't know how people are having beliefs. It's like, how are people doing this? Everything's changing in this life. What are they believing in? Do you know what picture have they put on the wall of their mind that they are so certain they are that till ad infinitum? Do you know this reality is the unknown is the beautiful part of it? Do you know? That means that's why human beings have the component, the dimension of love, because you want an unknown mind around you, not just a known mind. If the other person, you know everything about the other person, then it'd be like you have a robot. What's the point? You know, it's the unknown component. So we got to think of identity as where the attention is, not per se the person. So if, for example, a comedian comes and says something that's like intense and like it could be insensitive to certain ideas, but we got to just notice how the attention is. Do you know, like, is that person saying it as a hatred, or is the person just saying it, you know, to be an expression? Because human beings, it's a choice. Sometimes you can't analyze every consequence of your action before you do it. People are not like robots. They can't see all the different ways. This is why I just trust when I upload these talks. I'm like, whatever. You know, there could be people who hear this and think I'm a terrible person. There could be people who hear this think I'm a good person. You know, it's just where is the attention? Where's the attention? I think it's, if we think of it as these, the person is not per se good or bad. They have walked into a state where they identify with that. Do you know? That means, I mean, look at the concept of immigration. I don't know how many people are realizing this. Like, how is it? Because there can be this argument made that what happens in childhood is so intense that the person may not be even able to change in later years of their life. You know, as if they were sculpted in their youth by what happened, you know? So for me, like, this concept of immigration, I see it. And me personally, I consider myself an immigrant to this country. You know, I wasn't born here. You know, even though at the age of 7 I came here, and then back and forth between Iran, but I wasn't born here. Do you know what I mean? And the hilarious thing is, the child of an immigrant is actually the child of nowhere. You know? It's a very profound poetry. Of course, all of these are abstractions, you know? That means you could totally see, like, all the names of nations. We could call them different names. We could start naming the names of nations based on vegetables. We'll be like, okay, that nation is broccoli, that other nation is a tomato, this other, you know? So we can totally just change the language, but it doesn't mean, uh, see, it's taking the language for face value and not realizing that you only get to see how you are faced towards the language. You know, it's, this world is hilarious, guys. I'm telling you, this world is hilarious. You see human beings not only identifying with different, of course, genders or different uh, positions that they see themselves in, whether objective or subjective. But here's the thing: people have identified with everything, including including the whole thing. That means the yogic mystical mind, it's an inseparability of the identity from an individual activity and a cosmic activity. You know, there's this man named Swami Krishnananda. And he had this book where I just remember this part of it, where in the book he said, um, once you notice the inseparability between the individual activity and the cosmic activity, meditation stops. Meditation stops. And the reason being is that in that sort of mystical dissolution of the individual subject with the collective objective existence, what that means is, you might not believe it, but people have even identified with God. They have identified with everything. You know what it is? It's honestly like we're like savage. It's like, it's like savage beasts that found like some sort of paint, and, or let me say it like this: like, we just imagine right now you found some colors in nature and you colored your face. Now I want you to imagine your mind is colored by various ideologies that at some point your experience allowed you to identify. I feel just like Christopher Columbus, even though that man's behavior wasn't proper, but he did find a new place. And I don't know how many people know this, but the idea of native Indians, it's that they thought it was India, but it wasn't. You know? It was an uncharted territory, suddenly found access, suddenly the potential for living in a new land arose. I feel the same thing is happening, but in regards to the inner realms. And I'm not the only one saying it, guys. Carl Jung also has said it, and many others. Carl Jung said it in an incredible way. He said, unless you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. That means even if in this life you don't choose to identify with anything, the world will become like here's the thing. If you don't move yourself, the movements in the environment will identify you. You can experience this in any situation where you just don't engage, you know? It's like the student in the classroom that doesn't speak doesn't have an identity to the teacher, you know? It's very There's this thing that in in another talk, I spoke about the speed of thought and how there is an internal cinematic language going on, and that the identification of the person has to do with not only how your objective position is, but what the inner cinematic language is. What does that mean? That means you as a person, you wake up, various ideas and thoughts come and go throughout the day until you come and sleep. Right now, if somebody asked you, who are you, suddenly at some random point in the day, the internal cinematic language of that moment would most likely be your persona or your identity. Because here's the idea. How can you be a certain identity if the identity is updating? If the concept of identity is dynamic, how could you just identify with something? How can you identify as this or that? Do you know? When there's change. It's as if this world is very enlightened because nothing is left to be able to worship itself for too long. The unknown, or the unconscious, as Carl Jung would say, that is the next territory, dear listeners. That is why I am speaking. 4 billion years. This effort of the human being has been in the making. Now we are the ones left. We are the ones here. We are the only ones who can see this civilization. Whether it's advanced or not, we have the eyes. We are the ones existing. So many people don't exist yet, you know? And many people don't no longer exist. So you can totally see life is like an opportunity. Now it's an opportunity where in front of your eyes, phenomenology is objective. Behind your eyes, if you were to close your eyes and somebody asked you, who are you? You would feel you're a subject. You would be a creature of your inner image, if I can say that. So that's the thing. You can identify differently, because I have even looked at those people who are identifying with past life, with a past life or something. And that was very fascinating for me, because the argument can simply be that there is a genetical memory. That means physically we know that we are harboring the genetical the genetical features of our ancestors. So technically, who we are now as a genetical entity is we know there was a past life of our ancestors. In regards to the gene. There was a continuity. So the person suddenly thinking he's seen a past life, or the person thinks they're communicating with their future self, both these, trust me, there are human beings on this planet who feel these modes are real. For me personally, for a while, I did entertain this notion of the future self, not idea of past life so much, because the past is past. Like, what are you going to do? The past is already past. So even it's like you can imagine you're an eternal being and you have ad infinitum past lives. So what does it help you if you remember just one of them? It's like, in my past life I was, Gandhi's bodyguard. It's like, how does that help you? It's past. It's a past event. You see, it is done. But the future is different. Trying to wonder about the future self could be taken to far extremes, even from a secular perspective, not even too much of a mystical, just from a sci-fi angle, that if in the future time travel was possible, then there could be, imagine there was an invisible time travel machine. It's like the time travel people were smart enough to create stealth technology so primitive people don't attack their time machine. Or like a lot of in movies, you see the genius, it's like puts his time machine on the ground. Like, I don't understand why these time machines aren't hovering in the air so people at that time can't like touch it. Like, if I was to create a time machine, no way it would be on the ground. It wouldn't be. But anyways, what I'm trying to say is, it's an identification with attention to how the inner cinematic language has synchronized with the outer phenomena. So if somebody, let's say, you go somewhere and you suddenly feel like, not even deja vu, you suddenly feel like, I've lived in this house. I know exactly how many rooms it has, or I know it's like this, that would be the confirmation of the accuracy would be your eyes alone. There's even this metaphysical notion of that kind of makes the concept of even past lives even more mysterious. And you know what it is? It's that consciousness had a fragmentation. So the person's attention was in multiple human beings. It wasn't in just one being. The person wasn't just an individual soul, like la-di-da, going from life to life. What is it, like a dolphin swimming, jumping up in and out of water, So I'm saying the inner realms is very fascinating, but to identify with them is very complex. One, because of their changing nature. The second thing is because if you identify with the inner realms, there's a huge chance you stop seeing the outer realms. That means if I think right now, let's say I make this, I don't know, playful idea. Let me say, okay, here, let's say somebody comes up and starts this religion called um, warm coffeeism. Okay, warm coffee cupism. Or let's say coffee cupism. And this person comes and says the universe is shaped like a coffee cup and we're the coffee inside. Imagine. Imagine the whole universe is a cup of coffee. Now I can choose to say, yeah, this is truth, and this truth is true all the time, and every new moment, every day I will wake up and being like anyone who dares say the universe is not a coffee cup, you know? Do you see what I mean? It's an identity with an event, but your mind is witnessing multiple events, and there is an attributeless component to the witnessing. So really, the one identifying with the identity is not an identity. You're identifying. Identifying could be like you're wearing your identity based on how you're being a person in that moment. You know? And guys, anybody who's listening, feel free to share if anybody has an opinion on what I'm saying, you know? No, the thing is that all concepts, they have think of as if when Leonardo da Vinci said, realize everything connects to everything else. You can also see every idea simply alone by itself, or you can see it in relation to its environment. In the future, who knows? We may not even identify as individuals. I've conceived this as the idea. I'm writing a book. It's called Sky Cities. Sorry, it's called Civilization 2.0. Sky Cities, Earth Heavena, or the Heavenized Earth. I don't know which one I chose. And advancement beyond the language threshold. So right now, I feel we're primarily individuals because we sum ourselves up into narrative and story. Right now, I'm a person in a certain part of the world speaking to you in a certain way, you know, with a certain background, certain. Everything has been specified, you know. But this is more of kind of noticing that even though we specify, even though the person can just zoom in on certain features of the world and think that's what the world is, but in reality, the unknown is a value greater than the known, and our species has to. Not has to, but I could totally see why it becomes very complex. It's like the most complex step. It's honestly the best challenge of our civilization. How it transitions from a singular format of psychology, that means you're a singular self right now, into a multi-dimensional context. Who knows, 120 years from now, they may connect, a person's head may be connected to the internet, so they technically have like, you know, their identity is not, they can't, like right now, let's say your identity is, as this author said, Robert M. Persick, he said it's like the world is an infinite beach with infinite sand, and so you just take a handful of the sand and you call it your awareness. So based on what kind of a container for information you are right now as a human being, that is your identity, what you can contain, you know? Like you can totally see it in Instagram, this whole cosplay movement that is going on, or this whole thing that they do with Comic-Con. It's like the person is trying to, in that moment, be a different identity, be something, be a verification of their own real inner realms to themselves, you know? If you think you have to be a certain person, then you will not look for anything else. You miss out on a lot when you want a certain outcome. That's a wisdom that it took me a while to learn, and the best way I could sum it up for people is don't chase the butterfly, sit still and silent by the lotus, by the flowers, and the butterfly will land on your forehead. That is the way. Not chasing power. I don't know. It's like those people chasing spiritual power. That is like the biggest joke in the world, because the spirit is not a shape. It's not an individual. I don't know what kind of power somebody wants to see, you know, because the mystical angle feels like the older brother of this world. That means the older brother can see through the younger brother's psychology. But the younger brother cannot see through the older brother's psychology, you know? I've had various moments, especially in my experience of writing, where in that moment I can't. It's like there's no point of even having an identity because there is an inner event going on. That means that moment where the artist has the brush in his hand, there is no time to be like, who am I drawing this? It's the person that just sees the vision and is drawing it. You know, they are the vision, they are the whole event, right? So I feel we as human beings have reached a certain mastery and skill with the objective realm, with relationships in front of our eyes. But the relationships behind our eyes are very mysterious, and there are certain clues. For example, the biological program is habitual, is cyclical. There is a symmetry to your physical body. That's another clue. Another clue is that the duality of the psychology is because of your look at your heartbeat, look at the inhale exhale. Why should you be a creature that is inhaling exhaling, you know? That means, can you imagine being a point where air is never an issue? Imagine if there was a divine will, if there was a creator, that creator designed a creature that had no issue, didn't have to breathe. You know, it's like breathing was not even a factor, an issue, you know? So you see, it's. But I'm saying the idea is that the physical physiology is um, the physiology is the foundation for the psychology's potential. I think that's a discrete way I can say it. Those moments where I've a lot of my poetry I've sometimes shared with the audience. Honestly, in those moments, there is no time because the relationship with the inner realms is that it's not, you see, there's certain thoughts that arise because you consider them. Like right now, if I tell you visualize, I don't know, like a small glowing blue cube slowly orbiting in the air, rotating in the air in front of you. You can visualize that. It's like easy. You just visualize a cube spinning in the air, you know? But if somebody was to, you can't, like, how can I say it? You can't pick up that cube. So you can say if the human being is multidimensional, it is identifying in multiple levels, and if it's identifying as a self, with each self comes a world with it. You know, that means the self can't like stand in thin air. You know what I mean? We're right now a part of the condition of the planet, believe it or not. The planet is a giant and we're living on its back, you know? The giant, wherever the giant goes, if we imagine one day we suddenly see our planet just just as if it suddenly got a mind, the whole planet, and the planet, like a spaceship, the whole planet just flew a totally different direction. Earth suddenly decided to go to the Andromeda galaxy, imagine. The whole planet, like a spaceship, flew. That's actually a fascinating idea, no? We try to turn the planet into a spaceship, and that's the way we're gonna go explore different civilizations in the galaxy. That means everyone's up for the ride at that point, you know? I don't know, guys. It's there is an animate factor, there's an unknown dynamic factor, there's also an environmental factor, there's the multidimensional potential of the environment factor. I mean, there's like the list goes on. But I feel in the most honest, simple moments, it's just an instantaneous attention, just being. We are an unknown watcher of known phenomena at our honest core. I feel this is universal. If somebody is not doesn't feel they are a simple presence of attention before movement, like, I don't know. There is an instantaneity to attention that makes the hard problem of consciousness like a huge mystery, because language is dualistic. But if consciousness is a singular phenomena, then there would be no language that could potentially even explain consciousness. So it's either we believe consciousness is just from the brain, or uh, we either see it's not possible or we see something else is possible. I mean, that's really the crossroad. Right now, if I was to ask myself who is identifying with the identity, I could tell you that it's just attention. The whole moment. The whole moment is identifying with the identity. How can it not? I think this is why we have empathy, because others appear to us as a simulation of our own self subconsciously, because we don't know who they are. So it's as if, like, I mean, this is the whole thing about the concept of the whole like or dislike thing. It's what you're picking up from what you see. Now imagine we're evolving beyond subjects. What would happen to identity then? I would create a term here and I would call it would be a rhythm, a rhythmic identity. That means the identity or the skill or the ability or the action or expression is not from the human mind. It's from the rhythm of the event. Right now I'm drawing a stick figure on an empty piece of paper. And I can see that this stick figure, if I consider it a person in a vacuum, or a person in an unknownly vast universe, this person has an ability to identify as an individual. So on this planet, you can identify as a self. You can identify as the world, which a lot of children, they don't have their own identities yet. They don't have a personality or their own style because they're still looking at the world. I would say if you're a young person listening to this talk, go find what your interests are and just be bold. I mean, there's no greater instruction for youth. So this stick figure, can totally see itself as the empty page. It can see itself even not existing. You know, it can see a non-intelligent emptiness. This stick figure can identify with the hand holding the pen. This stick figure can identify with just what itself. If there was a mirror, if I drew a mirror here, I'm going to draw a mirror for it. So you see, it's like, this is really it. Self in a world. When you're conscious and when you're unconscious, the world is moving yourself. And all of this is occurring in the spotlight of your attention in the conscious waking state as I'm speaking right now. It's phenomenal, no? When you notice you're a creature of attention before you're a creature of whatever content comes in the attention. So in utter fascination of the mind, this concept of an identity, if we connect our heads to computers again, we will no longer be individual. If in the future, let's say naturally we go forth, we're not individual. That means it's this big question: is heaven for an individual? The guy got to the pearly gates and he was about to go in, and suddenly a person's like, "What are you doing, man? You can't go in." And he's like, "Why?" You know, and the person's like, "'Cause you got an ego." You know, you know. Imagine the person's like, "Why? Why can't I go?" He's like, "Look at this attitude. We can't have people like this going into heaven." For me, heaven was freedom. Hell was the lack of it. Archetypes. Carl Jung was so brilliant, and they don't teach them in schools. I mean, they probably teach him, but they don't teach Carl Jung in a way where the kid's gonna care, you know? An energetic presence that is being, an energetic objective presence that is being conscious of a subjective, being conscious as a subject dash personality. So the identity, you can identify with endless things. Like, when can the identifying stop? You can identify, like, you know, the person. It's like what are we, transformers? We see a better car, we can just like identify with. The inner realms are flexible. The outer realms, I feel, have to be honored. That means, like, you know, I could totally see, like, um, the outer realms is a program. It's a program with its own mind. Your body has its own mind. This is why we need, for example, the medical sciences to assist us. An advanced civilization will be self-sustaining. That means individuals will be healthy. They will be their own doctors, you know? Can you imagine a civilization, everybody, like, imagine we create such an advanced civilization that by grade 5, children know what like surgeon level, you know, like, for example, they become expert in the medical practice. You know, all children in the world. So imagine everybody is a doctor. I mean, everybody is a doctor. I mean, civilization will stop, of course, at that point. We need so many other things. But I'm saying, like, it's as if it would be self-sustaining. Right now, it's a situation where the best condition is to get 8 billion people to share their efficiency and to care for each other's blind spots. You know, we need to uh, un roar as the human tribe that surpasses ideology. Because ideology can possess, guys. You know, the moment you think you're a bad person, that can possess you. You can go live a lifetime thinking you're just bad, you know, but not realizing that you were bad perhaps in a moment, in a certain moment. Yeah, if the person doesn't move and sits still, their intelligence just comes across as a watching attention, you know? And there is one thing human beings haven't considered, and there's no way we can actually study it, which is, I call it, I think it's one of the great mysteries. That it, like, there's this notion that consciousness is embodied. Okay, let's just entertain for a second a metaphysical angle. Imagine there's this idea of this consciousness that is, you're like, okay, if you're secular, let me say it in a more discreet way. René Descartes, this philosopher, spoke about the mind-body dualism. So imagine your mind is in a different dimension than your body. Okay, that's how the idea of the soul kind of was, you know. So if your mind is beyond this dimension, now there is this traditional idea that the soul is in matter. But what if the soul has embodied space? This is a very, isn't it? I think this is a unique metaphysical idea, that what if we just like we can go out of body, for example, this idea that's entertained in New Age circles, you know, where, to be honest, the New Age community is. Anyways, let me not deviate. Um, Sorry, guys, to continue. Pretty much saying that the soul can go beyond space. So, just like how we realize there is awareness, like your mind is like a candle in the room, you know, consciousness is really like, just like how a candle in a dark room illuminates the room, your attention illuminates the sensory world. Now, this attention, just like how the self is a content, part of the content is a part of the whole moment, the whole sphere of your awareness, that its edge is as far as the sky, you know? So it would be a notion of not even identifying with space. And I would say if reality was a simulation, if that idea had some potentiality, space would be the way to leave it. A comprehension of space. Because it's very hard for me to discriminate that my awareness and myself are different. Like, here's the thing. It's as if, like, um, what's a good way I can say it? We can identify as a picture that is changing into another picture, another picture, another picture. We can identify as the whole movement, which is the awareness. Because awareness, just like how matter is in space, the idea of yourself is in your awareness. And awareness to self is attention. You know? This is why, playfully in these talks, I tell people, study your attention. The secrets of the universe are in there. Like, literally in your attention, the secret. So guys, to somehow wrap this talk, or pilot this talk to a destination, I would say this. We are living in a unique time where the more information we can identify, the more identities there can be. So based on the more stuff there is, the more stuff there can be identified. The more things are done, the more different ways things can be identified. So what does that mean? That means if you wanted to identify with this world, it's an all-you-can-eat buffet of imagery. Now, an advanced civilization perhaps would maneuver beyond this challenge by noticing that if you can be any identity, then who is being that identity? How could you just be one identity? That means, like, I remember sitting, this was the most profound moment of my life. In 2011, I was sitting on a rock in the middle of a river, and as I was on this rock, I was like, who am I? And I noticed my mind project me. Like I gave an answer. Me. It's like, who am I? I said me. And then I asked the question again, and then I saw it was a different answer. So I realized if I can endlessly give different answers of what dimension I saw in myself. So identity is endless when the universe is really. So the issue is thinking you're the identity, or considering you're a thought. That's the issue. So we have to become the way we can move past this linguistic challenge. I'm not joking. To bring things, as the Buddha would say, to the middle way. That means in a civilization where what is occurring in the civilization is in the modes of extremes. Okay, the middle way is the balanced way. Do you know? Because if you want to identify with the inner realms, the inner cinematic language, I mean, it's endless. If you just want to identify with the body, that too ends. Everything, even everything that people even get offended about, it ends. All of it ends. It's like the only thing we should all get offended at, offended by, is time. It's like, oh my God, time is so rude. It's not letting me finish my. It's not letting me exist more than 100 years. What is this? The man who complained about time. Gotcha. So that's the resolution. We begin acknowledging the linguistic simulation and noticing that language is a domain of expression. When we can realize communication is art, we will free ourselves from the savageness of the implication of words. That means, honestly, we should be we should be a civilization prepared for, if in case there's an alien invasion and people are just getting offended if there's a word, for example, they dislike. That means you have to at some point declare your attention. The attention is like an eagle that, regardless of how much it can fly to different branches and identify with different things, eventually, in order to be able to work, it has to identify with something, you know? And it comes to that attachment and detachment component. So if you can be not attached to a certain ideological self, you most likely are experiencing life, and the unknown, there's a surprise element, because you can try to overanalyze this life, and you know what happens? It just becomes lifeless. That means if we think it being smart means you're a better calculator, it's like we're doomed as a civilization, you know? It's not just about calculation. The Sufis would say something very profound. They would say to just take the path of intellect, is like whipping a dead camel to run faster. That means it's a lifeless analysis, which at the end you're going to see you never left the room for the mystery. So I feel it's not healthy if we 100% know things, and it's not healthy if we 100% don't know things. I feel it's like we have to keep a balance in life, because if you try to know things too much, that means Sherlock Holmes, like I'm telling you, that dude probably at some point was like, I see so much into things, but like life still can happen very simply, you know? That means you can endlessly complexify something. Complexity is, it's an illusion. You look at it closely, it's made of simpler stuff. So if you really want to take the idea of identity, everything is first of all codependent to the environment. That means the fact that we think we're separate from phenomenology is the unique part. The fact that we think we're separate from nature is the unique part. And honestly, we're the animal species on this planet that is natural, but somehow has managed to create a different environment. Like that's the thing, because if we were primitive, uh, the ecosystem would be the mind of the animal. But we are that animal that was like, okay, I don't want to just live with the other animals. I'm going to go do my own thing, you know? So we were like, okay, enough with the jungle, you know? And so we went towards the concrete jungle. And what is the concrete jungle? It means we see this pattern in history where the individual's position becoming more responsible for the meaning of its world. The more you go back in history, there was no meaning, it was just natural movement. We are like this crystallized analysis of this natural movement as a subject and object. Excuse me. There's a joy in life when you actually acknowledge the unknown. A lot of intense psychological urges you see in society. Let me tell you, if we consider, this is a recent idea, guys, I've been working on, I call it the expression and reception threshold. But it's a total different use of the, compared to the language threshold, so see the two ideas in two different realms. But I'll say it like this. I looked at human behavior, guys, and I'm like, what is this? And I'm like, what is this? You know, I looked at my own behavior, I looked at the behavior of others, and I noticed the human being requires, I think, in order to live a healthy life, just like your body shouldn't just remain still and you can't keep the body just 24/7 in motion. Do you know? Just like how there has to be a balance. There has to also be a balance between expression and reception. That means the human being wants to express throughout the day, and it has to in order for its psychology to survive, and it has to also receive. Now, more advanced versions of this expression and reception become love. Do you know? For example, it becomes love, you know? And even more complex, like, how can I tell you? It's like, I don't know if anyone has termed it. There is, but I'm going to term it, and it may sound strange to some, but I'm going to call it, there is an intelligent love, and there is a blind love. The intelligent love realizes they are a creature of expression and a creature of reception. That means you're receiving from the world and you're expressing as a self in the world. And when the person can realize others are also like this, then every person you meet, when you are looking at their psychology, you can totally see with what urge are they speaking. You can understand then the language of the eyes of the human being. And if we are to build an advanced civilization, and just to consider that in the future automation is going to take place and a lot of work is going to become online and digital, you know, it's that poetic question when the person is wondering if the universe, if the universe could look in the mirror, what would it see? An endless reflection, samsara. Dear listener, to care for what you don't know and to also care for what for others don't know, and as Carl Jung would say, to become aware of the collective unconscious, from the unknown of that from what we don't know comes the inspiration of knowledge. Most people, when they, for example, get writer's block, they're like, oh man, well, it's like, what do I do? It's like the ideas, the inspiration is not there. Let me tell you, just flip your attitude and look for what you don't know. Look at what you don't know, and you'll be astonished at how much you will know. That means there's many angles to life. And sometimes I think the concept of the angels, the different archangels, for example, in the Abrahamic traditions we find in a theological study we find, you know, as if they are beams of the one sun, you know, and it's this phenomenal thing where your like energy feels it felt. There could totally be underneath every concept that every human being has a total emotional landscape. A landscape where it's not, your behavior is not per se based on rational decisions or per se irrational. It's based on what wants to express or what feels it can express. Human behavior, it's like I kind of see every human being as a pilot. I mean, in different contexts. Like sometimes I use the term advanced communicator, sometimes I use the term pilot. But what I mean by that is like I look at which pilots have realized they are a pilot and which haven't. Which human beings have realized their own eyes. Not the eyes of God, not the eyes of the divine, their own eyes. That's the center of your universe, at least. That means I could totally see why they say they have this term, the person got out of there in a blink of an eye. Because reality can change in a blink of an eye. Guys, I need a quick break. I'll be back. So 2 minute, let's say a few minute intermission. Thanks for tuning in, whoever's tuned in so far and might tune out. That's it. Okay, so to continue, there was something I was thinking of doing. I was thinking of trying to share with the audience something about the brain and the current mystery that you can say. Um, Psychologists have concluded. Like I'm gonna tell you. Like I'm gonna introduce you to the arena of the question. But first, I gotta find a picture of the brain. So just hang on for a second. Okay, so I would like anyone who's tuned in and really cares about this to look at the wallpaper. Okay, I'm gonna place two pictures here. These pictures are to give you an idea of the human brain. Okay, now I'm gonna read something for you, which is let me find the year for this. What is the year? What is the year of this book? Okay, guys, 2000. When was this written? Uh, okay, 2007. I mean, this book is pretty old, but still, there's something worth sharing about it, where I'm going to read for you. And so, pay attention to the brain and these pictures I've put. Okay, folks, so I'm going to read something for you here. I want you to look at the wallpaper. The cerebral cortex, plural cortices, also known as the cerebral mantle, is the outer layer of neural tissue of the cerebrum of the brain in humans and other mammals. The cerebral cortex mostly consists of the six-layered neocortex, with just 10% consisting of allocortex. Okay, so the cerebral cortex is that outer mushy part of the brain. Okay, and it's filled with neurons. And now I'm going to read this comment in this book on psychoanalysis. Sorry, not psychoanalysis. What is it? Psychology, themes, and variations. Like that's like it could have had more of a creative name, but okay. The book's just called Psychology, Themes, and Variations. Anyways, let's look at it. It says split brain research stimulated speculation about relationships between cerebral specialization and cognitive processes. Some theorists believe that each hemisphere has its own stream of consciousness and mode of thinking, which are applied to specific types of cognitive tasks. What does that mean? That means right now the way human beings are engaging this idea of the brain, where the show of consciousness seems to be happening, is that there are two hemispheres, and the the left part of your brain hemisphere correlates to the right part of your body, and the right part of your right brain hemisphere correlates to the left part of your body, right? So there's a cross relationship there. Now, the left brain and the right brain, of course, the left is considered to be where rationality, thinking, calculation, like the linear faculties, right? And the right brain hemisphere is the creative component. To continue, guys. So, what does that mean? That means the passage in the book, it's saying, which are that each hemisphere has its own stream of consciousness and mode of thinking. So what does that mean? That means the person is like, honestly, like a portal between two worlds. That means it's as if like there are two selves, just like we have two eyes that see the same. There are two brain hemispheres that are being one brain. Okay. So it's saying split brain research stimulated speculation about relationships between cerebral specialization and cognitive processes. Some theorists believe that each hemisphere has its own stream of consciousness and mode of thinking, which are applied to specific types of cognitive tasks. Now, check this out. Some theorists also believe that people vary on their reliance on the right and left halves of the brain, and that schools should work more to exercise the right half of the brain. That means that means the creative side, you know? Even though it's like the method system is totally the opposite, but it's so there's some theorists are saying that we should focus on like the right half of the brain. Why is that missing out? That means the creative component. That means the student expressing itself and learning the teaching of the teacher that way, rather than the student just staring at the teacher's and the teacher being in his own island. Anyways, the cerebral hemispheres are specialized for handling different cognitive tasks, but only to a degree, as most tasks engage both hemispheres. Moreover, people vary in their patterns of hemispheric specialization. This is honestly like psychologists trying to study the brain like an engine. Like it's like, you think life is that easy, you know? Anyways, guys, I'll keep reading. It says evidence for duality in consciousness divided along hemispheric lines is weak. So even the book is saying that we're not sure if we can say like these two hemispheres are just each is their own. Because it is again being one brain. It says evidence on whether people vary in brainedness and whether the two hemispheres vary in cognitive style is inconclusive. So I feel it's pretty much us trying to treat the brain like an atom and to see smaller particles and try to think that these smaller particles is the relationship of the bigger particle. So I think it's kind of not I mean, of course, we got to see what's inside the engine, you know, which we have as like medical practices, neurologists, those guys are on that. But I'm saying that, you know, it's like the educational system trying to say, like, I don't know, it's a strange way of analyzing the moment. That like you just think some person is more their left brain, right brain. No, no, no. I think it's more where the attention has gone and in what ways the attention has received and found methods to express itself. Because that thing I was saying about, I suddenly told you that thing of dictators in history, they can't use propaganda against newborn infants. You know, the messed up propaganda in the world, those dictators can't use that on a newborn infant because it doesn't have a psychology yet. You know, so we watch, as we watch pattern received, now pattern chooses to express. So we are honestly a symbiosis with the environment. You know, so a light from the environment, which is the environment, enters our eyes, and then we subjectify. You know, we become a creature as a subject. Anyways, guys, I'm going to read something else that's here. It says there's no way to teach only one hemisphere of the brain, so a right brain curriculum is pointless. Popular ideas about the right and left brain have gone far beyond the actual research findings. So, guys, this is, of course, in 2007, right? Sorry, not 2017. But I'm saying what it's implying is that it's very complex and it's still not that clear that we can really just say the different brain hemispheres are working. I mean that each specifically is working. You know, that literally means, I mean, it's not a bad model because it means that it's like we are two beings, two selves being one objective self. That's what it would imply if this analysis went forth. But overall, I think throughout time, because you could look at an idea how it is now and you can see how the idea will grow on its days here. Of course, we're all looking at a world where we're extracting information in a more complex way of looking at the identity. I can say that waves of information are hitting the person. That means what's fascinating about the conscious waking state is wherever your attention goes, there is information. That means where if you're someone who's seated somewhere right now, just move your attention. Literally just look left, look right. You see how where your attention goes, it's like that wave of information hits you. Okay, guys. To continue, pretty much, we human beings uh, have wondered about many things, and we are an explorer species, really, by nature. That means whatever the person identifies with, if they get bored, what are they doing? They're looking for something else. So we're human beings who identify not just with what is changing, but also the change as well. You know, it's as if we seek for, the thrill of living. Now, we can say the scientific approach has looked at the outer realms, how what it means that there's objective phenomena, and we can say psychologists have looked at what it means for there to be a subjective self or subjective phenomena, you know. And the mystery has been left to, for now, because we're treating it as the brain is simulating consciousness. This is why, like, for example, you go look at psychology. There was this movie about it, like it was this messed up movie uh, where it showed, like, for example, there was the concept of, I don't know, they would interfere with the brain to change the perception, thinking it was a solution, you know. But anyways, many systems have had a dark past. Usually, you know, it was just more savage back in the day. But now there's a sort of civility. Anyways, psychologists, when they're looking at this subject, they need the help of the neurologist. Now, the question is, whatever finding the neurologists show, it becomes a puzzle of how do we draw that bridge from the movement of the specific movement of neurons being a determinant of this exact subject the person has. The brain, to me, appears as nature's unique antenna, and it has such a strange shape, you know. It's honestly a muscle. The brain is a muscle, so your intelligence is uh muscular. It's like, who knew all of intelligence was a muscle? But anyways, so this connecting, linking of the accurate linking of the neurological phenomenological movement to a subject is I find that's the impossibility. That's where neurologists are realizing, like, okay, this is like observer effect gone crazy, you know. Because language is something that it was something we created. So what we're using to find meaning is actually something we created, so it comes back to us. This is why I don't know, like I totally feel that I mean, in every moment of history you look at, the human being had a different contentment. Of course, the external events, what happens in the outer realms, is that has a huge influence on psychology. For example, if someone was raised in a theocratical society, you'd have a sort of the shadow of a religious law on your psychology. Do you know? But what I'm saying is, like, perhaps an advanced civilization will be identified with an with, I think, at best collective rhythms. I mean, what can happen to a bunch of raindrops on your windshield? You know, they can either evaporate, they can be completely pushed aside. Imagine a nuclear extinction of the species, or these raindrops, they trickle down and they integrate. And in their integration means that, of course, we got to treat the objective realms with its own space. Like the objective realms can remain, but the inner realms have to be engaged. That means I think it is definitely an attempt to use language at least in a different way if we consider the inner realms. The inner realms explain a lot of behavior, guys. You know, and I feel like if I use this enough, people will realize what I mean. You know, because all issues you can totally see, like anything, any work of art you see. You can see the object is just an object. The color is just the color. You are the life in the moment. I feel that is really what's going on, that we are the whole moment, but not as form, perhaps as the space-like awareness that Vedic thought tried to, Vedic thought touched upon it. To compartmentalize the brain could be an invalidity to, again, it functioning as one thing. And if the brain is an antenna, even intelligence can't be considered. Because you can say, imagine, like, let me tell you why the brain, we can totally see it as an antenna. Because the person, imagine you're in Pompeii, you're on a volcano, there is like lava coming from the volcano, okay, and so you're watching that, and you see an outer event, and then you start running. What does that mean? That means the volcano, the lava coming down from the volcano, and the human being seeing that, that was a signal. The signal entered the human being, was received by the human being, and once the signal was received, a new expression of the human being came, running away from lava while it was raining, and if you couldn't, you'd become a statue. You know, that was nature's way of making statues, you know. That means if there is a chance that the brain is an antenna, the signal has nothing to do. The neurons are just uh, movements of the signal. So right now, this is a great question to ask: is the world being you, or are you being the world? Right now, are you your name, or are you just a natural event? You see, language is the world inside the world. This is what I'm saying. Whoever identifies with language as a thought, you have no class. You know, it's like there isn't elegance. You know, language, when you see it as a technology, it's like a pen, it's like a paintbrush, it's like a tool. You know, the tool is evoked when it's required. You know, if you go on holding a tool in your hand, imagine language is like um, a hammer of judgment. Okay, imagine language is a hammer. All right, let's say Thor's hammer was a metaphor for the ability of the soul to wield language. You know, okay. But anyways, let me say that let's say there's a tool in your hand. It's like having that tool in your hand 24/7 means you don't even understand the value of the tool. So to think that you're a thought 24/7 is utter silliness. Do you know? Because even in deep sleep, you're not a thought. You know, in deep sleep, nobody has problems because there's nothing to have a problem. Deep sleep is one of the most unique things. It's like, I don't know how people are not freaking out every day. They're like, wait a minute, was there a gap? You know? But we see it's because on an existential level, we're alive. When you sleep, your body's alive. You're in bed. But experientially, it's like the film stops playing, and then you suddenly wake up, and somehow you have a sort of remnant awareness of what the film yesterday was. You know. So the antenna theory on on the brain, and even just, it's not that, guys, even sociologists can just butt in here too. Sociologists could come and say the brain has been sculpted by its environment to a degree that the brain, we can't even study the brain is gone. That means there has been so many, it's as if, or let me say it like this, it's like we can't study something that is changing. Like how much can you study a river? Do you know how many buckets of water, samples of a river can you get to study to realize that it's like a moving river? You know? I think this is a good analogy to see, like here, I remember creating this metaphor where I said this drop of water fell from the heavens, shouting at the heavens. The drop of water shouted, said, God, what is this? You know, shouted at the heavens, shouted at, like, you know, the heavens above where it had descended from, where it had fell from, and it's like, why? Why is this happening? I'm just a meaningless drop, just falling in space. What's the point of it? Now, from the vertical dimension, that is valid fact. That's a raindrop vertically falling. Little does the raindrop know, it's going to fall into the ocean, and in a horizontal dimension, it was never alone. You know, it's skill is the key. I feel the currency of the future will be skill. I don't know why, but I feel that's an important sentence to share. So anyways, guys, the mystery is still there. I'm sharing this to all advanced communicators and pilots of attention and consciousness in this world. Whoever you are, wonder about reality. Realize there are unanswered questions. That technically means you're alive at a pioneering stage. Okay? You know, and the theories on language, because identity is a narrative, right? That means the person saying, I am this, I am that. That whole I am this, I am that, those are sentences. Those are narrative. It's as if identity is kept, the skin of that ego, I've said, is language. Language is the skin of the ego. What does that mean? Language is the story is what's keeping the identity. You know? Now, how would I say it? It's really looking at different levels of change. I feel that there are really four modes of, you can say, even identification with the world. There is a relationship of the unknown with the known. We don't know who we are, we can see the world. There's a relationship of, we can say, the known with the unknown. Do you know? That means imagine we know who we are. Imagine you were a person that they suddenly, like some extraterrestrial civilization invaded Earth, picked you up and dropped you off on a random planet. That would be where you know yourself, but the world is unknown. You know, so in one dimension, it's the relationship of an unknown phenomena with a known phenomena. In another dimension, it's the relationship of a known phenomena with an unknown phenomena. You know, a known self in an unknown world. Then we have the relationship of a known self and a known world. That means we know who's looking and we know what we're looking at. You know? You can say that is materialism's dream. You know? But it's not that easy. You know? That we feel right now, I think it can totally be seen as an action of arrogance. That if we feel we know, we just know ourselves and know the world, and there's no questions. It's like forget philosophy, art, psychology, and the unknown and the abstract. You know, it's just known. You know, you know. So and the last. So the known with the known, I would say that's more towards the materialistic, and we can say what the scientific lens entertains. Now, the last is the unknown with the unknown. And the relationship of an unknown self with an unknown world, I would say, is the epitome of of the evolution of the objective, the subject object or object subject based animal or entity. So the unknown is really where exploration can happen, because if everything is known, what is there to explore? You know, that means if the teacher in the educational system just shares a fact, that's not enough. You got to share a question. That means, you know, let me say it like this: the teacher should write a question, and have all the students attempt to answer it without knowing what it's about. I mean, nowadays I think that's impossible, but because everything's online. But I'm just saying, like, people don't want to just be soldiers, you know? People want to navigate. You know, it's like you can totally see that you are the leader of your own existence. You know, like who else can lead the eyes that nobody else can see except you? So yeah, guys, anyways, who is identifying with the identity that, you know, it's not a who. It's just that, just like in, what is it, the first law of thermodynamics, where energy cannot be created or destroyed, it can just change from one form to another, you know. So we're just conscious energy. That means if the soul is the soul, is when consciousness and energy are inseparable. When consciousness and energy are inseparable, that's the definition of the soul. Yeah, I think that's definitely the high point of this talk. A definition for the soul when consciousness equals energy, because then the idea of the transmigrating soul from incarnation to incarnation that Buddhism and even yoga entertains, certain levels of yoga. And I think this is what they would call Sat Chit Ananda. Sat Chit Ananda means conscious existence, sorry, existence, consciousness, bliss. So conscious existence is bliss. Do you know? That means when your free will discovers that the attention is an inseparability of energy with will. It's like, I think that would be and these Tai Chi masters who are like just in the parks doing Tai Chi, that's a very advanced level of life where it's just attention and energy, no ideology, no thought, no personality. It's just energy aware that it's here. And it can maneuver, navigate, and as you wield your attention, you'll it's its own display. So anyways, guys, I hope this episode was helpful. This idea of the identity, the final conclusion is that it's dynamic. Okay? And so we can say right now we're identifying, you can identify with just your inner realms, or you can identify with the outer realms, or whatever. You can just go to a totally new environment and think you're that environment. You can identify, but we can say the identity inevitably is left to where you put your attention last, your attention where your attention is, and being able to be content with the unknown variables of life and known variables of life, and to be able to simultaneously witness them. That's you are an advanced communicator, in the sense that you are simultaneously the advanced communication of your universal sector. You know, the, it's as if we are free before the concept of freedom, in a way. That means to think that freedom is it a state, because a state, what does that mean? That means it's like, imagine the known was a chemical and the unknown was a chemical. So it's as if both chemicals are infused and it's neither known or neither unknown. What is this? You know. So the chemical reaction of the known and the unknown is perhaps the world. So we can say there are known forces in this world, and there are unknown forces. Now these unknown forces by the primitive minds were interpreted through mythology as gods, spirits, and all this. In modern minds, we have stripped away the animate component to it, because I'm telling you, the thing science is missing. They've even said this, that just look at the concept of the memory palace and you'll see what I mean. Your mind, the more abstract something is, the more you remember it in your long-term memory. Now science, by stripping away the animate personality factor to the world, has made it less abstract, and science is thinking that's great, that's a good thing. But the issue with making it less abstract is that it is not memorable. Do you know? So the thing is that the secular mind, and especially modernity, scientists and sociologists and psychologists, and also bring the philosopher, of course, always invite a philosopher to any table. To find a way to mythologize efficient technology. That means, you know what the modern, we can say secular mythology would look like? The first human being, let's say we see, envision a reality where human beings, they are in a cyberspace setting, and the first human being to step out of the cyberspace simulation, or the first human being to this human being was born, and from the beginning of its life the parents put the child in a cyberspace simulation with goggles on its head or whatever, some advanced technology, imagine, and the child was the first human being on earth that lived completely in a cyberspace reality, imagine, just written in history books. And we'd be like, oh my god, that's super savage, you know? But it is a potential, you know? That's one thing that in certain of my talks, I notice it's going to be a hassle for the future generations. You know, right now, we're wondering if reality is a dream or not, like, or is reality a simulation or not, you know? In the future, they're going to wonder, is reality digital or not? You know, this is why I feel it's impossible to connect the human brain, which is a certain storehouse and container for information, to suddenly a massive amount of information. Because if you did that, identity would be destroyed. That means connecting to our heads to the internet in the future is the death of the individual. Doesn't get more poetic than that, folks. So there's, I don't know, it's very important, you know. I'm going to share this other idea as well. I remember writing the script, where in this script it was a short film, and in this short film there was this, I saw, envisioned in my inner realms, this father dressed normally, like a normal human being, but it's in the year, imagine, 2050 or 60 or something, somewhere around that time, okay. And in the film, what happens is the daughter, you know how, like, you see in some films, like in some TV shows, like the daughter goes to the father, can I get a tattoo? And the father's like, no daughter of mine's gonna get a tattoo, or something like that, right? And then the daughter goes and gets it anyway. So in this short film, I envisioned a way this can happen, where in the future, imagine your child comes home from school and says, Dad, everybody's a robot in school. Everybody, all the kids, instead of toys, they upgraded their biological bodies into robot suits. You know, and imagine kids would go to class as robots, in human consciousness, and robots acting as if, like, yo, check out my suit, but their biological existence is gone. So this daughter is coming to his father, all my friends are robots, Dad. Can I be a robot? And the father's like, excuse me, you know, shocked, like that's going to be the, like, tattoo of the future. The whole body becomes a machine, you know? That's pretty chaotic, you know? But anyways, so what happens in the story is, suddenly the ending of the short film, it's, I'm telling you, it's a short film, it's like an event, the whole film. The daughter comes home as a robot, and you just see a tear in the father's eyes, and then you see an artificial tear from this android girl's eyes, you know. And then I thought of creating two endings, a possible ending where the robot comes and cries, then all the family, they come outside, and the child never became a robot. But I think I would make it a robot, because that would be more exciting, I think. But anyways, that was the idea, that the transformation of humanhood into the digi-natural. Anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. I hope this episode was helpful. Much blessings and namaste.